Welcome to today's deep dive. You've given us some really interesting articles about love and relationships in the age of social media.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating topic, isn't it? I mean, we're all constantly connected, sharing our lives online. But how does that affect our real life relationships? I think that's what I'm really curious to unpack with you today.
It is a great question, and the research you provided really dives into this complex dynamic.
Hmm.
We often hear about the negative side of social media and relationships.
Right.
We're going to look at both sides,
Yeah.
the potential benefits, and of course the pitfalls, especially when it comes to, building trust in a relationship.
Yeah. I think it's easy to assume social media is like the villain of the love story, but maybe
Uh,
it's not that simple.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And I think one of the most interesting things the research highlights is how social media can be particularly beneficial for couples who are geographically separated.
Oh, interesting.
It makes sense. Being able to see your partner's face,
Yeah.
even through a screen, can make a huge difference in feeling connected.
That's true. Yeah.
I've got friends in long distance relationships who swear by video calls and daily messaging to keep the spark alive.
Yeah.
It's like their own little window into each other's worlds, even when they're miles apart.
Right. And beyond just bridging distance, social media can also be a way for couples to celebrate their relationship and share those special moments with friends and family. Think about those cute anniversary posts or heartwarming vacation photos. They can actually strengthen the bond by creating shared memories.
Oh, I see what you mean. It's like a public declaration of love and commitment in a way.
Yeah.
Plus, let's be honest, who doesn't love scrolling through a feed full of happy couples? Sometimes it's nice to see those positive relationship stories out there.
Exactly. And in the early stages of a relationship, social media can be a really useful tool for getting to know someone. It's like a sneak peek into their interests, hobbies, even their social circle.
You're right. When you're first dating someone, you devour every bit of information you can find.
Exactly.
Right. And social media offers this curated glimpse into their world. I mean, it's not a foolproof way to judge compatibility, but it can definitely spark conversations and reveal shared interests.
Absolutely. But here's where things start to get tricky. While sharing those happy moments can be great, one of the articles pointed out that the constant stream of seemingly perfect couples on social media can actually fuel a sense of competition and comparison in your own relationship.
Oh, the comparison game.
Yes.
It's so easy to fall into that trap, isn't it? You see those picture-perfect couples on Instagram, and suddenly your own relationship feels a bit mundane.
It's a real phenomenon. In fact, studies have shown that the more time people spend passively scrolling through social media, observing others' seemingly perfect lives and relationships, the less satisfied they tend to be with their own relationships.
Wow, that's interesting. So even if you're not actively seeking out those comparisons, just being exposed to that constant stream of perfect relationships can chip away at your own happiness.
Exactly. And this can lead to a whole host of negative emotions like jealousy, insecurity, and even resentment. It's like you start questioning if your relationship measures up, even if it's perfectly healthy and fulfilling in reality.
All right. It creates this unrealistic standard that's impossible to live up to.
Yeah.
And speaking of challenges, another article delved into the difficulties of setting boundaries in the digital space. It's like there's a whole new etiquette rulebook for relationships online, and it's not always clear what's acceptable and what's crossing the line.
It's true. There are so many gray areas like, is it okay to follow your exes to like photos of attractive strangers? How much PDA is too much? These are all questions that many couples grapple with.
Yeah, it's like navigating a minefield sometimes.
Yeah.
And even when you think you've established clear boundaries, there's always the potential for miscommunication and misunderstandings online.
Absolutely. Digital communication lacks those subtle nuances of tone and body language that we rely on in face-to-face interactions. So a simple text message can easily be misinterpreted, leading to unnecessary arguments and hurt feelings.
That happens all the time, doesn't it? You think you're sending a lighthearted message, but it comes across as sarcastic or critical.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating.
And then there's the issue of attention fragmentation. Even if you're not actively arguing with your partner online, that constant urge to check your phone or scroll through your feed can create a sense of distance and disengagement in the relationship.
You mean even if you're physically together, you're not really present?
Exactly. And over time, that lack of presence can erode the emotional connection and intimacy you share.
It's like you're together, but not really together.
Yeah,
And I imagine that can be incredibly hurtful for the partner who feels ignored or neglected.
you're absolutely right. It can lead to feelings of resentment and loneliness, even if the intention wasn't there.
So we've talked about how social media can lead to comparisons, boundary issues, and even just a lack of presence in the relationship. But are there ways in which it can actually cause more serious damage?
Unfortunately, yes. One of the articles highlights a particularly concerning trend: social media's role in fueling distrust and suspicion in relationships. It's almost like it creates a breeding ground for paranoia.
It's true. I've heard stories of couples who become obsessed with monitoring each other's online activity, constantly checking their partner's messages, likes and follows, searching for any sign of infidelity or betrayal.
It's a slippery slope, and that kind of behavior, even if it doesn't uncover anything concrete, can create a toxic dynamic of distrust and control in the relationship. It's like you're constantly looking for evidence to confirm your worst fears, rather than choosing to trust your partner.
That's a recipe for disaster, isn't it?
Right.
Instead of feeling secure and loved,
Yeah.
you're constantly on edge waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Exactly. And unfortunately, sometimes that distrust can escalate into something even more damaging: public arguments and confrontations on social media.
Ugh, yes. I hate when couples air their dirty laundry online. It's
Ah.
never a good look.
It's really not. Arguing in the comments section, posting vague passive-aggressive messages, or even tagging each other in inflammatory posts, it's incredibly disrespectful and hurtful.
Not to mention embarrassing. It's like inviting the whole world to witness your relationship drama.
Right. And those public displays of conflict can be incredibly damaging to the trust and intimacy you've built. It's like taking a sledgehammer to the foundation of your relationship.
Okay, that's a powerful image.
Yeah.
So we've got distrust, public arguments. Are there other red flags to watch out for?
Well, there's one more we need to discuss, and it's a sensitive topic: emotional affairs. Social media has made it incredibly easy to reconnect with old flames or strike up flirtatious conversations with people you find attractive.
It's true. It's so easy to fall down that rabbit hole of online connections, especially when you're feeling neglected or unfulfilled in your current relationship.
Exactly. And while not all online interactions are harmful, it's important to recognize that these digital connections can sometimes blur the lines of fidelity and emotional intimacy.
I see what you mean. What starts as a harmless chat can quickly escalate into something more intense and emotionally charged, leading to a sense of betrayal and hurt feelings.
And even if those online interactions never cross the line into physical infidelity, they can still have a devastating impact on the trust and security of your relationship.
So it sounds like social media presents some serious challenges to modern relationships. But is it all doom and gloom? Is there any hope for love to survive and thrive in this digital age?
Of course there is. It's not all bad news. The key is to use social media consciously and intentionally, setting healthy boundaries and prioritizing real-life connection.
Okay, that sounds promising. So where do we start? What are some practical steps couples can take to protect their relationship from the potential pitfalls of social media?
That's a great question, and that's what we'll delve into next.
Yeah.
Before we move on, it's important to remember something you touched on earlier. Social media is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. It really comes down to how we choose to use it in the context of our relationships.
That's a great point. It's easy to blame social media for all the relationship woes, but ultimately it's down to us to set those boundaries and use it responsibly.
Exactly. And that starts with open and honest communication with your partner about what feels comfortable for both of you.
So let's get into specifics. One of the articles mentioned the whole following ex's dilemma. Is there a right or wrong answer here?
Not really. It really boils down to what you and your partner agree on. Some couples are totally fine with it, while others consider it a non-negotiable boundary.
I can see how that could be a source of tension, especially if one partner is more comfortable with it than the other.
Absolutely. And it's not just about following exes. Think about those seemingly harmless interactions, like liking or commenting on photos of attractive strangers, or even engaging with posts from people you've had a romantic past with.
Those are definitely tricky waters to navigate. It's about being sensitive to your partner's feelings, even if those interactions seem innocent on the surface.
Right. And remember, those boundaries should be a two-way street. If you're asking your partner to limit their interactions with certain people online, you need to be willing to do the same.
That makes sense. It's about mutual respect and understanding.
Exactly. Another area where couples often bump heads is how much they share about their relationship on social media. Some people love to broadcast their every move, while others prefer to keep things more private.
Oh yeah. I know couples who practically live their entire relationship on Instagram, constantly posting photos, checking in together,
Yeah.
and declaring their love for all the world to see.
And there's nothing wrong with that if it works for them, but other couples might find that level of public exposure suffocating or uncomfortable.
Right. It's about finding that balance that respects both partners' needs and preferences.
Exactly. Maybe you agree to only post about big milestones like anniversaries or birthdays, but keep the day-to-day details of your relationship private.
Or maybe you decide to have separate social media accounts for personal use and only share specific photos or posts with each other privately.
There are so many different ways to approach this. The point is to have that conversation and figure out what feels good for both of you.
And it seems like that open communication should extend to other areas of your online life as well, right? Like setting boundaries around what topics or activities are off limits for online discussion.
That's a great point. Maybe you're both comfortable sharing funny anecdotes about your day on social media, but you agree to keep disagreements or sensitive personal issues private.
Or perhaps one partner is dealing with a personal challenge and wants to keep it completely offline.
Exactly. Respecting each other's boundaries, both online and offline, is crucial for building trust and creating a sense of safety within the relationship.
So let's say you notice your partner doing something online that makes you feel uncomfortable or insecure. How do you bring it up without starting World War III?
That's a great question. And it's important to approach these conversations with sensitivity and empathy. Avoid making accusations or jumping to conclusions.
So instead of saying, "Why are you always liking her photos? You're totally into her," maybe try a more gentle approach.
Right. You could say something like, "Hey, I noticed you've been interacting a lot with person's name online lately. I'm not trying to control you or tell you who you can and can't talk to, but I wanted to share that it's been making me feel a little insecure. Can we talk about it?"
I love that. It's honest and vulnerable without being accusatory or controlling.
Exactly. And by framing it as a personal feeling rather than an attack on your partner's behavior, you're more likely to have a productive conversation.
Because that's the goal, right? To understand each other's perspectives and find a solution that works for both of you.
Right. Remember, you're on the same team here. You're not trying to win an argument. You're trying to strengthen your connection and build a foundation of trust and mutual respect.
That's a good reminder. So we've talked about setting boundaries and communicating openly. But what about those moments when we catch ourselves spiraling into jealousy or insecurity because of something we see on social media?
Yeah.
How do we handle those tricky emotions?
That's something we all struggle with at times. It's so easy to get caught up in those comparisons and let our imaginations run wild.
Especially when you're already feeling vulnerable or insecure about the relationship.
Exactly. The first step is to recognize when those feelings are arising and to pause before reacting impulsively.
So instead of immediately confronting your partner or posting a passive-aggressive comment, take a deep breath and try to process what's happening.
Right. Ask yourself, what specifically about this post is triggering me? Is it a real threat to my relationship, or am I projecting my own insecurities onto the situation?
It's about separating those knee-jerk reactions from the genuine concerns that might need to be addressed with your partner.
And remember, it's okay to ask for support. Sometimes talking to a trusted friend or therapist can help you gain perspective and work through those emotions in a healthy way.
It's good to have that outside support, especially if you're finding it hard to talk to your partner directly about those feelings.
Absolutely. And once you've gained some clarity and perspective, you can decide whether it's something you need to address with your partner or whether it's something you need to work through on your own.
Sometimes those insecurities stem from our own past experiences or negative self-beliefs.
Yeah.
And it's important to recognize that.
You're right. And in those cases, it's about doing the inner work to heal those wounds and build our self-esteem.
So what about those situations where social media is causing more serious problems in the relationship? What are some signs that it might be time to seek professional help?
Well, if you're finding that social media is constantly leading to arguments, distrust, or a sense of neglect, even after trying to communicate and set boundaries, it might be a sign that deeper issues are at play.
And in those cases, seeking guidance from a relationship counselor can be incredibly helpful.
Absolutely. A therapist can provide a safe and neutral space for you to work through those underlying issues, improve your communication patterns, and develop strategies for building a healthier, more connected relationship.
It's like having a coach in your corner helping you navigate those tricky relationship dynamics.
Exactly. And remember, seeking professional help is a sign of strength, not weakness. It shows that you're committed to your relationship and willing to do the work to make it thrive.
I love that. It's a reminder that we don't have to go through these challenges alone. There's support available if we need it.
Absolutely. And sometimes, even before seeking professional help, taking a deliberate break from social media as a couple can be incredibly beneficial.
It's like hitting the reset button on your relationship and rediscovering those real-life connections that might have gotten lost in the digital noise.
Exactly. It allows you to reevaluate your priorities, reconnect with each other in a more meaningful way, and create space for those important conversations that might have been getting drowned out by the constant pings and notifications.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need that distance to really see what's important.
Right. And even if you don't take a complete break, just being more mindful of your social media usage as a couple can make a huge difference.
Like setting designated phone-free times during meals, date nights, or before bed.
Exactly. Or even just making a conscious effort to put down your phones and truly engage with each other when you're spending time together.
It's about choosing to prioritize those real-life connections over the endless distractions of the digital world.
Right. And remembering that ultimately love is about human connection. It's about vulnerability, intimacy, shared experiences, and those deep, meaningful conversations that nurture our hearts and souls.
So even though social media can present some challenges to modern relationships, it doesn't have to be the enemy.
Exactly. It's about using it consciously, setting healthy boundaries, and remembering to prioritize those real-life moments of connection that make love truly thrive.
This has been so insightful. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on navigating love in the digital age.
I'm glad to hear that. And, as we move into the future, it's going to be even more important to have these conversations and adapt to the evolving landscape of technology and relationships.
That's a great point. As technology continues to advance, how do you see social media shaping the future of love and connection? It's a bit of a mind bender to think about, isn't it? We've got virtual reality dating becoming more mainstream, and even AI companions entering the scene. Makes you wonder how those advancements will redefine intimacy and connection.
It is fascinating and a little bit unnerving at the same time. Imagine a world where you can go on a virtual date with someone who feels incredibly real even though you've never met them physically, or developing a deep emotional bond with an AI companion who seems to understand your needs and desires perfectly.
It's like something out of a science fiction movie. And it raises so many questions. How do you even define real versus virtual in that kind of world? And what happens to our expectations for human relationships when we have access to these hyper-realistic alternatives?
Those are the very questions researchers and relationship experts are grappling with right now. On one hand, these technologies could offer amazing opportunities for connection and intimacy. Imagine being able to connect with someone from across the globe and share experiences in a way that feels incredibly real, even if you're physically miles apart.
That could be revolutionary for people in long-distance relationships,
Yeah.
or those who have difficulty finding meaningful connections in their immediate surroundings.
Exactly. And for people with social anxieties or disabilities that limit their ability to connect in traditional ways, these technologies could open up a whole new world of possibilities.
It's exciting to think about the potential for those who might otherwise feel isolated or excluded from traditional forms of connection.
Huh.
But I also wonder about the potential downsides.
Of course. As with any new technology, there are always risks and unintended consequences. One concern is that these hyper-realistic virtual experiences could make it even harder to distinguish between genuine connection and a simulated one.
You mean we could become so accustomed to curated, idealized versions of relationships in the virtual world that real-life relationships start to feel disappointing or inadequate by comparison?
It's a valid concern, and it could make it even more challenging to navigate the already complex world of dating and relationships.
Another thing that worries me is the potential for these technologies to exacerbate existing inequalities. What happens when only certain people have access to these advanced forms of connection? Does it create a digital divide in love and intimacy as well?
That's a crucial question that we need to address as these technologies become more widespread. It's important to ensure that everyone has equal access to these tools and that they're used in a way that promotes connection and well-being for all.
So it seems like the future of love in the digital age is full of both exciting possibilities and potential pitfalls. What advice would you give to listeners who are trying to navigate these uncharted waters?
I think the key, as always, is to be mindful and intentional. Just because a technology exists doesn't mean we have to embrace it wholeheartedly or let it dictate our relationship choices. It's important to take the time to reflect on our own values, needs, and desires in relationships.
And to communicate those openly and honestly with our partners.
Absolutely. And to remember that technology should enhance our relationships, not control them. At the end of the day, love is about human connection. It's about vulnerability, intimacy, shared experiences, and those deep, meaningful conversations that nurture our hearts and souls.
So whether we're connecting online or offline, the essence of love remains the same. It's about choosing to prioritize those authentic connections, those moments of shared joy and vulnerability that make life truly worth living.
Beautifully said. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to encourage our listeners to embrace the future of love with a sense of curiosity and open-mindedness, but also with a healthy dose of caution and self-awareness.
It's about finding that balance between embracing the possibilities that technology offers while staying true to the core values that make love truly meaningful and enduring. Thank you for guiding us through this complex and fascinating topic. It's given us a lot to think about.
It's been my pleasure. And remember, the future of love is ultimately in our hands. Let's choose to create a world where technology helps us connect more deeply, love more authentically, and build relationships that thrive both online and offline.
That's a beautiful vision. And to all our listeners out there, keep those conversations flowing, those boundaries strong, and those real-life connections thriving.
Until next time.